Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Career Development Interview Series, and we're now at episode 3, and I'm super thrilled to welcome Dr. Ramya Raghavendra. In a minute, I'll let her introduce herself with a career path, but let me just, introduce in my way, the way I know Ramya. So I got to know Ramya when she was a PhD student at UC Santa Barbara. Her advisor is a good friend of mine, Elizabeth Belding. So she came to HP and worked with Partha, who's been doing amazing work on data centers, and he's now a Google Fellow. So Ramya did some really important work on power management that actually affects the whole environment and sustainability. And then she went back. I think she'd done some other couple good internships. Then she graduated and went to IBM Research in New York, where again, she worked with my good friend, Kangwon Lee, and she built a very good career there. And recently, I think about 2 years ago, she joined Facebook/Meta AI, and she's leading the efforts on sustainable AI. So very pleased to have you. Welcome, Ramya. Maybe you can kind of say hello to students and give your own introduction.
Sure. First of all, thank you, SJ, for the introduction and for the opportunity to talk to students. It's always super refreshing to be able to do that. I think you covered most of it. I started my graduate school in Santa Barbara doing my master's and Ph.D. in computer science. My focus was on wireless networking. And after that, I did several internships at Intel, HP Labs, Microsoft Research, and following which I had a long career in IBM Research as researcher in TJ Watson Labs, which is where I had an interesting progression from wireless networking to machine learning. And in the last year and a half or so, I've been at Meta. I drive the Green AI program where we look at building AI models efficiently.
Cool. So, I mean, I'm dying to get to your recent work, but we kind of want to go through your whole career development. So let's start off with growing up. I think you grew up in India. Right. And I think for Koreans and Indians, we kind of share like a very intense academic pressure-packed environment, right? So maybe you could tell us about how was it like growing up there, and then how did you decide to actually go to grad school in the US?
Yeah, it's exactly as you describe. It's very competitive, and you sort of, I think your path is forged for you. You know what the next exam you're going to take and what the next universities that you're going to, and if you do well, you sort of stick to that plan. And I think at the end of high school, I knew that I've always been interested in science. And at the end of high school, I sort of knew that I want to work in sort of research. I've always been that annoying, pesky kid that keeps asking why is this so, and how can it be different? So it seemed like a natural choice. I think the field of computer science was mostly fortuitous. I grew up I'm from Bangalore, the Silicon Valley of India, and it was just everywhere. And you saw the most interesting things in computer science happen around you. It was everywhere. It was hard to escape. So it was a natural choice. People around you were doing it. All the smartest folks around you, you knew, were into it. So that's sort of really how I got into it.
And then how did you decide to go to the States for graduate school?
I think it was just having always lived in one country and one culture. I was interested in trying something new, and US was a natural choice because of how many options you have, how many people you already know who are studying there. It seems like a comfortable choice. And of course, the quality of education is not something I had to think twice about.
So you went to University of California, Santa Barbara. And once you get there, like, what was your process in deciding, you want to work on wireless networks and also, choosing your advisor?
Yeah, that was, I think it sort of happened even prior to getting there. I did my internships in Daimler Chrysler, which makes the Mercedes-Benz cars, and we were working on ad hoc wireless networking.
Oh, wow.
And I had the opportunity to publish a paper on the topic. So I sort of knew what the problems were, and I knew Professor Melding before I got there. So I think one of the main reasons I chose that was because I knew of her and her work, and she was sort of interested in having me as one of her students. And when I went there, I worked on a project I took her course, worked on a project, and I realized I still like it and I find it interesting. And continued to work with her. We had a good both. I liked the area. We also had a good personal relationship for it, so it was easy for me to.
Then I guess your internship, was that an undergrad?
Yes.
So how did you get that internship? And I mean, did you know like you were going to work on add-on networks, or you just showed up and that was something that was given to you and you just like liked it, or?
Oh, you're really testing my memory here. Two was so long ago. So I remember it's common for us to do internships in our final semester. We are evaluated on it, so it's taken seriously, and the companies make opportunities, create opportunities for students to try. And you also sort of know it could be your next job. So it's taken seriously, not unlike here. And I remember applying to a few companies, and this was a research lab, and we had the opportunity to write papers. And I knew that here's a great chance for me to work on research before showing up in grad school and see if it's good for me.
So, I mean, I think this leads to my next question, because if we look at your PhD work, you already brought up like you had 3 really good industry internships. You know, I think you were in Microsoft Research, you were at Intel Labs and HP Labs. So did this undergrad experience kind of help you do it? Like, I mean, were you motivated to get internships? Is it something you recommend the students to do it? And, you know, any tips on getting, I mean, internships at these top companies is not easy to obtain, right? So do you have tips on getting such internships?
Yeah, I definitely recommend it for anybody who's thinking about it. It gives you a very, very compact experience of what working in the industry would be. You have a nicely packaged problem, you work with some of your core workers, and you know, most importantly, you get to know what are the problems important to the industry, and if this is something you will enjoy working on. And you get to know about the company culture better than any other way. How to go about it is, you know, just make sure you do your coursework, you learn your material, but also do hands-on projects. And I applied far and wide. One of the things that I asked folks like, hey, why did you pick my resume over all the others you got, was I consistently got the answer that I showed up with a lot of interest and passion, and I was genuine about you know, that I wanted to do that work and succeed. So I guess taking that passion with you and showing it helps a lot.
So you definitely come prepared. You were ready, basically.
Right. I usually don't pick a problem if I don't think I will be interested in it. But when I go, I bring my 100%, and I really want to do a good job.
So, I mean, I love all your answers because it leads me to my next question. So when I looked at all your internship projects, not all of them were, you know, very aligned with your PhD dissertation. So you have some flexibility. And I know some students are very hesitant to do it. I mean, was that something that you were okay with in the beginning? Was it, you know, somehow forced, or, you know, but in the end, I think it also helped your career. So, I mean, what was your mindset when, you know, you were, because you said for even internship project was something you were already passionate about.
Yeah. I think the one that was most different was the one at HP Labs, but it was so early in my PhD process. First of all, I really have to thank my advisor for being so flexible and letting me do what I wanted to do. I know not everybody has that flexibility. And that said, the first one was early enough that I don't think we didn't have a commitment. I was not working as an RA or anything. So I knew I could go try something new and see if there were other things. Like I could have maybe chosen another advisor if that's what I wanted to do. I was really interested because this was about data center and power and trying to consume the least amount of power. Interestingly, like years later, I'm still doing the same thing. But it was interesting problem. I think more than anything at that point, I obviously didn't have, I didn't know what the future would look like. But my mentor Partha was, he sounded so, and I know now he sounded so passionate and good at what he was doing. And I thought, here's a person I can really learn from and model what my research career might look like. And he was amazing. I think he was one of the best influences I had early in my career, and I look back at it. And I knew this is something I could that could have practical applications, and I really wanted to. More than anything, HP Labs was such a prestigious institution that I thought, hey, it's a summer. Nothing bad can come out of this.
Right. And I mean, the Partha, when you hear it, he's always so convincing, right? So I mean, I even wanted to work with him on every project he works on. So,
Yes.
yeah. So I mean, I was going to mention that because your current work reminded me of your work at HP.
Yeah.
I mean, was that something you were always interested in, but you still, I mean, after working on it, is it something on the back of your mind? Because when it comes to AI right now, everybody's working on how to get this accuracy up, but we really didn't think about, the influence it would have and environment and society at large. But this has been your main thing now, right? It almost came to full circle, right? I mean, was this something that, I mean, I don't know if you could plan it, but was it something that you always had in your mind?
It's very interesting, and I've thought how I'm doing what I was doing years ago. I think it's a consequence of sort of what you hinted at, not being afraid to try something different. And as a result, over the last 15 years or so since I started my PhD, I was learning skills in various areas. And finally, the final step came about beautifully, where Meta, Facebook was looking for somebody that could look across all layers of the stack and be able to push across all layers of the stack. So I know I did systems and networking in graduate school. I looked at runtimes and higher layers of the stack. When I was IBM, I even looked at the very top layer where you look at machine learning models. So I spent some time doing it. So I sort of knew, at least knew enough to have conversations and talk to experts about what's going on in each. So it really sort of brought everything together and came to the perfect role. In terms of, I think, environment, not directly, but I think I had never tied the environment piece with technology. But there were two separate things. I've always been interested in nature, starting from what I eat to what I do in my spare time. It always has something to do with outside, because I'm indoors like 8 to 10 hours a day, and I try to interact with nature and wildlife as much as I can. So when this opportunity came, that sort of tied together all the technical knowledge I had gathered, and as well as tied it to the environment and climate. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass.
So let's talk about after you got your PhD. So I mean, you chose IBM. So what was the decision process? Were you also looking at academia, or were you just looking at industry? And ironically, this is a company you did not intern at.
Yes.
Right. And my other question was also, because I also went to UCLA. Once you live in California, it takes a lot to get us out of California, right? So could you share your interview process? What are some of the criteria you were looking at, and how you eventually chose IBM?
Yeah, that's easy. I just interviewed at research labs after my graduate school because it was fairly clear to me that's where I wanted to be. I enjoyed the, work on a problem deeply, think about the problem without, ties about how it's going to be productionized or any of those. I I don't remember where all I interviewed. But I definitely remember this was the one I was most excited about, just in terms of, TJ Watson to me was very a great institution to go work at. And leaving California, no, I think I'm one of those people. I've always grown up in the middle of a busy city, and I wanted to be in a city again. I like to walk. I don't like to sit in cars, and I don't like to live in suburbs. So I visited New York, and it felt like home.
Okay. So, like when I graduated, I was choosing between HP and IBM because I really
Mhm.
love IBM as well. But to me, it was almost like equal, and I just wanted to be in California.
Mhm.
So that's how you and I differed, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've done a lot of good things at IBM, and one of the questions student asked was, is there any benefit or maybe even a downside of having worked at one company for a long time? And then, what kind of triggered you to actually make a move to
Right.
Meta?
I have a lot of different thoughts on it, and I can share. One point is that when you choose something like academia or research labs, which are not terribly different, in my opinion, at least not back in the day, you sort of had the freedom to pick on a problem and work on it. Um, there's a lot of advantages. You have the freedom to work on a problem of your choosing. You're publishing, you're still active in your community, you're traveling, giving talks at conferences. Um, you are somewhat isolated from the use of this technology, like what happens after you publish your paper or you put out an open source tool or any of that. So, and at some point, another consequence of that is it's sort of a fairly flat hierarchy. And if you're thinking about, you know, fancy titles and growing in your career and managing large organizations, that's definitely not the right place to do it. So, um, so staying for a while in going back to your question, staying 10 years in IBM was definitely gave me a lot of opportunity to work on research problems. I can't think of any other place where I could have started off in networking and slowly moved to machine learning. It gives you the time and the space to go study if you are not good at it, learn, gain skills, and publish papers or do research. So I stayed there for a long time because I really enjoyed that part, and I could continuously keep publishing and working on it. That's a huge advantage, and I think that's why you choose that career. Um, and how is it moving after 10 years? I mean, is there any bad part? I think those are, like I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's natural to start questioning, like, what happens, like you publish research, it sits on a shelf a lot of times till all the other stars align and it's used in production. Or as it happens in some cases, there is just the market dynamics pushes you to think about moving your research into production,
Mhm.
and you start getting into applied research and development, so that at some point you start questioning, like, is this the right place to do research and development, or are there places where this work can be done much more effectively, or at a pace that you want to do. So I think that was one of the main reasons I moved.
Mhm. So, now should I say Meta or can I still say Facebook?
Um, I think we're supposed to say Meta if you're
Okay,
referring to the company. Yeah.
yeah, let's go with Meta. So, one of the student question was also, so what are some of the perks at working at Meta? Is the because I
Hmm.
mean you have I mean, not only IBM, you also done some internships, and I'm sure you also see some other companies in
Yeah.
different, cool work environment. How's the cafeteria, how's the food, those kind of things.
Right. To me, the biggest perks about working, especially at Meta, is the bottom-up culture. It doesn't. It's somehow still, uh, in a small sense, maintains a feeling of a startup where me as an individual contributor, I can pick and choose what I want to work on in the scope of problems that we are looking at. And the problems and your work is not handed down top down. So I do feel like there's a lot of freedom to work on, and some of the smartest people that you can work with. It's amazing, and I think when you're working with people who are really good at at their jobs, it's just a pleasure to go to work, learn, and things go smoothly. Of course, the material pleasures are great. There's a lot of free food everywhere. Fresher 15, you might have all
Yeah,
heard. There's, gelato and smoothies and everything. There's the perks are amazing, and it has some of the, it has great benefits, and they take good care of the employees.
right, right. So the question is, I don't know if this specifically made, I think this is even happened at IBM. So your transition from networks to machine learning, right? I'm sure there were some, demand from the industry,
Yeah.
but I'm sure, you had to work hard on it, but you also were ready for it, right? Because you already had the flexibility when we were talking about your career. When did you sense it? Like because it's almost like you kind of like almost switched, you pivoted.
Right. It was a little more gradual than that. So I started off working exactly what I was doing in PhD, looking at network protocols. But I can't remember. Sometime early in my career, IBM sold its network business. So almost all the networking groups had to switch to looking at not directly looking at wireless networking, but looking at data analysis. So we were still working with telcos, and essentially trying to do data analysis and understand, why is my cell phone connection bad, or is this a network problem, or is this a user device problem, and what we call analytics. And then we had to pick up a lot of skills on how to do data analysis, and instead of like protocol design. And I think that gradually took some time to get those skills. You had to pick up new runtimes, Apache Spark and all the big data analysis tools. And at some point, we are hey, we are looking at network analysis. We can broaden the scope to looking at other things. And I think the kind of things we were looking at, like time series and geospatial data, we realized we need new runtimes and analytics tool, like data engineering, data and analytics tools to build them. So we had to build our own tools. Ended up giving a talk in Apache Spark about what runtimes you need to analyze this kind of data. So had to, I think, get a lot of those skills for data analysis. So I worked on that for a long time, enough to be able to, you're looking at statistical models, and then you look, hey, let's use a neural network to analyze this really large data for which we don't know what's the best method to use. So it was definitely also influenced by what was going on around us and the increase in machine learning. So there was always a sense of, let's learn the tools and see if there is a problem that needs to be solved, for which that's the right tool. So I think that's an important skill to have as a researcher. You need to learn how to learn, because I feel like every 5 years there's a new technology that comes up. And no matter what you are doing these days, whether it's computer architecture or actual machine learning, you're still you need to use ML, which is a tool. If you look at the paper we wrote, some of them are computer architects. So it's really that pervasive. So there's also that sort of like, let's keep up to date. And then I came across an opportunity that sort of married all those skills to solve a large problem.
Right. Right. What I'm hearing is that, I mean, throughout your career, you basically, how do I explain it? You broaden the horizon, basically, right? Because
Yeah,
you still have that your systems background, even when you're doing data analysis, you're still going
yeah,
in the systems perspective. But
yeah,
while you're doing it, you will keep kind of going to the other end. Hey, what about the models? So, and it's like you actually make your experience matter, right? Because you actually know stuff from the systems perspective to the whole, like you mentioned, computer architecture issues, modeling, data analysis, and now even, further societal impact.
yeah.
So I mean, like, this is like your career building, so to speak, right? Ideal career building.
Yeah. I think that's how it worked with me. And I'm not saying that's, the right way to do it. I think that's one way to do it. In most of, when you look at somebody's career over a span of time, you'll see that they are either a generalist or a specialist.
Mhm.
Generalist is one who can, take skills from one field applied to the other and do a good job in any given field, and over a span of time acquires proficiency with a lot of speeds.
Mm.
But you could also be a specialist where, I don't think I could build the next, GPT-3. That's just not a specialty I have, but you could choose to go that way where you say, I'm going to be the expert at natural language processing or computer vision models, and that requires a lot of focus and time. So it's really many ways to build a career.
Yeah. So what are the question? I think it might have been from Heron. So I mean, you're doing a research that is really important, but as a researcher, some people they just do research, write a patent or write a paper, and that's it. But you also have a responsibility to bring awareness, right? And I think, Meta is doing a good job of, like, podcasts, blogs, and, senior fellows giving talks. I mean, what's your thought on this? And, I mean, and also personally, how do you, any tips on how to, I don't know if market your research is the right term here, but bring awareness to the important problems that you're working on.
Right. I know, to me, the reason I do this a lot, especially for this work, is because the end is so important. Like, we're talking about and carbon emissions and climate change, and I feel like I think everybody should hear this message and think about this. And that's why, I make sure that it's constantly on people's minds, because we have a company where 10, 20,000, I don't know the exact number, but thousands of people work on machine learning. And if we don't bring the awareness that what we are doing could have consequences, we should think about it, we should be frugal and efficient in what we are doing, then we simply won't achieve the goal. So for me, that's the objective of marketing this research. But I think in general, whatever you're working on, it's important, because presumably as a researcher, your objective is to either for people to take this research and use it in something, in some real life product or use case, or to further this research. That's why you're working on it. And if people don't hear about it, neither of those outcomes will happen.
Right. And I think this also goes back to, how do you choose a research problem? You should be working on important stuff, right? That you should talk about, right? Because if you do something that nobody's going to care about, or you can't convince them, that's not something you want to invest your time and effort on in the first place. Yeah.
I think so. Although some people get a lot of pleasure in solving a problem because interesting to them,
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that, but yeah.
Wrong with that, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So because you're working on machine learning and a lot of students are really interested in machine learning, they ask a lot of general questions for you. So there are some questions like, what should I do to become an expert in machine learning? What kind of programs and tools should we get experiences in?
I mean, you're already in the right place. I just take as many statistics, math, and machine learning courses as your university provides. Programming languages, there's really, you have Python, there's not a lot of ambiguity there. There's a lot of competitions. I know that's a great way to sort of get your feet wet and start looking at public data sets and problems that are important to the area and to industry or whoever is putting out these challenges. So I think that's a good way. But if you look at it, there's just plenty of resources on the internet, lots of experts publishing blogs and explaining all the latest research that happens. So whatever you can get your hands on, it's good. But a strong foundation with courses is the right place to start.
So student also asked, like, what are the new trends in AI, but maybe I should rephrase it, like from the industry's point of view, right? What should be the next step forward for AI?
I can tell you what problems I see. I see researchers around me working on. There's a lot of interest in applications of machine learning to various areas, whether it's healthcare or just document processing, a lot of taking manual work and making it automated, and robotics. In terms of like development of AI itself, I know some of the hardest problems are around how to use less data. The data is, especially labeled data, is hard to come by. So there's a lot of effort around how to use less data and have machine learning models teach themselves. There's also a lot of interest around using machine learning for generation of text, images, music, art, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we've been playing with it as well. It's amazing. Like they could write papers, and there are even tools that actually give you research ideas now.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I think the latest research I saw from Google Brain was explaining why, explaining text. So you can actually look at, it's called Palm, and essentially you tell it a joke and it explains why the joke is funny.
Well, if you have to explain a joke, it's not funny in the first place, but yeah, but maybe the machine should learn that.
It was really cool. Yeah. So I think the bigger point is sort of explaining why certain decisions are made, because machine AI models are used in areas which have consequence to society. So I think explainability and transparency is important. So that's the area.
Yes, another question from the student is, I mean, obviously machine learning AI is super hot right now. It is the trend. I mean, how long do you see this lasting? I mean, is this here to stay? Because I mean, one of the things I talk to for young grad students, for instance, or even undergrads who's trying to choose research topics, like, hey, by the time you get machine learning, I mean, Ph.D, let's say machine learning, I mean, right now it's a good time to get jobs if you have a PhD in machine learning, but in, I don't know, 6-7 years, who knows, right? So, I mean, do you expect this to last very long, or I mean, maybe it's not as hot as now, but it will be a major part of our lives?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if how qualified I am to make predictions. So let me set up with that disclaimer. But what I think is really important for if I was a graduate student is to look at, I think there's two clear choices. Do I want to go into machine learning and become further the machine learning research, or should I learn to use it as a tool so that I can go solve my physics problems or climate environmental problems or searching for new materials? There's just so many applications where you can use it as a tool, but you don't need to further the research as much as know how to use it. So I think the latter is definitely here to stay. You have a cool new tool that can help you solve problems that you couldn't solve otherwise. So I think, searching for the next protein or, your drugs, COVID drugs, all of that, there's definitely that's here to stay for sure. Now, machine learning research itself, I don't know. It could go on for a really long time, or we could realize that we've hit some limits, fundamental limits, like we cannot scale our machines any more than this, or at some point there would be some limit you would hit and say, okay, this is, and until there's a paradigm shift, like what we saw with neural networks that had a lot of boom in 90s, but took a long time for us to see practical applications. So there's a reason to think that could happen again.
So Ramya, I mean, from the moment I met you at HP, right? I mean, you were very young, passionate, full of energy, but the important impression I have for you is that you have all this, important characteristics to be a good researcher, but you were always very humble and mature, even at a very young age. One example I have is that, you remember the year I chaired MobiCon, and I invite you to be part of the organizing committee. And I still remember your reply. And most people say, okay, cool, I'm in, whatever. But you said, of course, I'll be part of the team. But, getting another chance to work with you is something that, that matters to you. And I don't know if you remember that, but when I got the emails, like, I don't get that many email of such. It made me feel so great, right? And even just the 1 or 2 lines of email that actually, I still remember that. I mean, so yeah, how did you learn to be like that? Or is it something like from growing up, something from the parents, your environment, or did you, yeah.
Oh. Well, thank you. I definitely feel humbled by that compliment, and the fact that you remember it after so many years. I do not. No. Maybe because it's just something natural. It's not something I thought about. It's what. I think I've had a few mentors over my career sort of explain to me that it's not the actual work that you do that you will remember and hold dear to your heart, but it's the relationships that you build along the way that you'll cherish the most. And I've always found that to be true. When it's when I build strong relationships, I find that we all lift each other together, and good work is a consequence of it. Everybody's motivated to be their best self. So I always make it a point to build good relationships and continue with that. And I forget who said it, but it's also like what people remember is not what you said to them, but how you made them feel. So I always remember that to make sure that you are being kind to people and generous. I have no idea. It could be a very Hindu upbringing I had, or it could be all these great mentors who've had successful careers giving me such advice.
Yeah. I mean, those are great advice, but I still give you a lot of credit because many people hear such advice at young age, but they don't take it to heart, right? I mean, they realize as they get older. But I mean, you actually took that at a very young age, and I mean, I could see now. I mean, although we've been in touch for a long time, I haven't talked to you for a long time, but you really developed your career really well because of your ability. But I'm sure, like you said, all the bonding relationships that you built, and especially in the engineering field, I mean, you always have to work together, right? Because you want to be known as a person that is fun and nice to work with, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things of building a successful career, right? Be easy to work with.
Definitely. I think so. And if I look at who I want to work with and who most people will want to work with, I don't know anybody who says I would love to work with a jerk.
Right,
No, I would
right,
definitely building good relationships is key. And I think especially if you want to scale through others, it's fine if you want to focus on your work and do it by yourself, but you cannot, I don't know, do a lot of great things, a lot of large things that way. So if you definitely want to like build organizations either directly as an organization leader or just as a strong technical leader who others will want to follow, you definitely need to learn to be nice to people, I think. I mean, hold your ground. It doesn't mean compromise or just go with the flow, but being able to uh, align with people, explain why we need to do something, and take people along with you on the journey.
right.
I have a question. Yeah, as we have talked about your career development, you have been faced new things such as new research field, and you moved from India to States, and you met various people in various work environments. So, and you have done well. So you are here now. So my one question here is how do you have any tip like to adapt such new environment or new things, like, yeah.
Let's see. I think the thing that came one thing that we should remember is change is hard for anybody. So
Right.
expect that you will be nervous, expect it's going to be hard, and just say, this is temporary and I'm going to get through it. So that's sort of like being kind to yourself and anticipating that is important. And the second thing that I've found helpful is ask for help. People are generally very helpful and kind and want to help, especially as students. People are super generous and want to help. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and think of it as a sort of paying it forward. They help you, you help the next student, and that continues. And one thing that, talking about cultural growing up in India, you don't learn very well is to deal with ambiguity. You sort of, what is the next, like I said, these are the exams you're going to write, these are the things you're going to do. The hard part for me was to be comfortable with ambiguity. And I think these things help, just knowing that yeah, it is hard, it's uncomfortable, but that feeling is also sort of telling you you're pushing yourself, you're going to grow, and when you come out of it, you would have learned something new. So learning to accept ambiguity and get past it and solve it. So I think that's not really a tip, but more like a skill that we should all learn, because it's so important as you go out in the world and you don't know what problem you're solving. How do you know you've succeeded? Which is all sort of, things you deal at a different scale when you're moving from one culture to another or one university to another.
Right. No, I mean, I love your comment here because you talked about how growing up in India, the same in Korea. Like, I mean, there needs to be certain, like, we call it hawat, like after school activities. Parents basically arrange everything and even arrange all the rides, right?
Yes.
So you were told what to do,
right.
right? And by the time you have to make a decision, that's when you freak out because you never had to make a decision, right? And for me, this is when I got my PhD, because I was told I need to go to the States and get a PhD, and I did that. And when my advisor said, you need to get out of here, I'm like, what should I do now?
Right.
Because you were almost like so focused on the goal, but the goal should be actually part of the path.
Right.
But I was like, okay, I get my PhD, and I thought that was going to be the end of my life or career, right? But it was actually the beginning. Then I had to figure out everything and all the decisions we're going to make. There's no clear answer, right? And that's why even this whole interview career decision, the students are wondering, okay, what should I do, right? Because it's hard for them to make decisions, and a lot of students are into machine learning and software, so they want to ask questions and get advice from people who actually walk this path, already have
Right.
walked this path. So I think this is a very important advice, right? Be used to uncertainties.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's such a great age that, you're in grad school, you can go do internships, go to an industry, go to a research lab, go work in your regular software development, where you are working on a much shorter time scale and more focused problems, do research. And one of the best things advice I got handed from a mentor was just picture yourself doing one job versus the other, and you'll sort of be able to know which one you want to do. And the second piece of advice really is no decision is permanent. So it's okay to explore for a year or two. I've done that and realized that no, what I was doing earlier or something else is the right thing to do. Even though it feels like a huge shift going from academia to research lab to industry is really within the field of computer science, what you're doing is really not that big a shift in the grand scheme of things. And you can always shift from one to the other, especially if you don't, if you don't take forever to make that decision. It's much easier to do on a shorter time scale. You did that, SJ.
Yeah, I mean, the thought process I had was, I mean, I didn't want to be a professor at the time. And all the good papers I read in grad school were from Bell Labs.
Right.
Yeah, so remember, like in the 90s. So
Yes.
so I kind of wanted to write papers where other younger students would read.
Right.
So,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what I wanted to ask was about your career path and deciding to stay in research at industry, not going back to academia. But I think you somewhat answered it, but could you explain more details in the decisions in your career path?
I didn't plan to be in academia. I know that if you wanted to go down that path, you would be publishing a lot more. And all the kind of systems work I did, they were not amenable to being publishing a lot more, done a postdoc. I don't know, the lure of the industry for me was one, I like to work on problems that have some application, like be grounded in a real problem space. And that's where I got my problems throughout my career. You work in through these internships, I always drew inspiration from what are real problems we can solve. And I didn't have to write grants. That was a big plus. Like, why would I do that if I didn't have to? So yeah, it was not a very, 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 it was not based on wisdom or anything. Yes.
I think I'm guessing because you kind of did a test drive, right? You did an internship, and you're sort of knew what your professors are doing, so you kind of knew both sides, and you knew what you wanted, right? Through
Right.
those experiences.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that others felt constrained and chose a different route, chose to go to academia, was that when you're in the industry, I think the practicality is that the problems you will choose sort of are within the confines of what that company is interested in or working on. No matter how blue sky you want your research to be, it just is not practical, either to grow your career or inspire others around you to work. Your path is much smoother if you work on problems that can eventually have some practical applications. And that's a good reason many people don't go that route. And I definitely love working with students, which I get to do that only in summer now, and usually one student a year. So that's something I miss not being in academia.
So thanks again for your time and sharing your experiences and advice. Do you have any general concluding remarks or advice to, undergrads and grad students?
Wow, advice. Let's see. I'm going to maybe summarize all what helped me in my career. So very quickly, I sort of forged my career on maximizing life experiences, trying new things and seeing if I like them. And I always remembered it's supposed to feel scary and terrifying. That means that I am pushing myself and learning new things. So it's okay, and I give myself that latitude. For me, the learning is the reward, and I don't think about, hey, I want this title or I want to do this. And I usually, when I make that a consequence, I enjoy my work and the relationships I build, and that sort of helped me. I am not great at it, but I make a point to ask for help, and both collaborate and bring people along the way and build a community. And I always sort of look at, for me, the professional success follows as personal satisfaction. So I pick on problems that I know I'm going to be passionate on, and I'm going to be okay spending lots and lots of hours working on. So those are the things that's helped me succeed and make it satisfying.
Right.
And
yeah.
And finally, thank you so much for the opportunity. First of all, it's such a pleasure talking to you. It must have been several years, and great to chat with you again. And thank you for introducing me to your students.
Yeah, I think it will inspire a lot of students. And I want to add on what you said at the end. I think you said, work on problems you're going to be passionate about, but that also involves working for a company that gives you the freedom and space to work on something you're passionate about, right? So I think you also have very good employers throughout your career, and finding those kind of companies is also, very important.
Right. I think this is where ask for help matters. So even when I landed at Meta, I was able to sort of say, hey, this is important and something I'm passionate about. And definitely I have the freedom to work on it. So, yes, choose your company and your next career such that people recognize what your strengths are. And there's always work to do. So you might as well work on something where your strengths and passions can be applied.
Right. And and also, I know we have to conclude, but I think asking for help is okay because you have built good relationships, right? And that's why you also have to help other people, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think even Steve Jobs said this, right? Always ask for help, because most of the time when you ask for help, people feel good when somebody asks for help. Right? It means like they respect you and they think they could learn from you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And most people know as they grow that they're always going to learn as much from their mentees than that the mentees learn from them. So usually most people are willing to help. Sometimes it's, little, depends on the time, you might get little help or a lot of help, but really the worst thing that can happen is people will say no, but that, most likely not.
Yeah, right. All right, Ramya. I mean, I think
on that note, if anybody wants to reach out, or you have my emails, definitely students are free and to chat, and I would love to.
Or they can be friends with you on Facebook. Or should we all get the VR gears and meet at the metaverse?
Yes, you should.
Ramya, I think you delivered very important message to our students. So on behalf of all the students, thank you very much. And on a personal level, I hope to stay in touch again. And yes, thank you very much, Ramya. All right, stay healthy and safe.
Thank you for staying up late.
No problem. It was fun.
Very late. Yeah.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.